Hello there. Could we really be just 9 days away from a global financial meltdown? Well, if US lawmakers don't come to an agreement, anything is possible. At the moment, US government spending is taking it perilously close to the $31.4 trillion debt ceiling, an amount that is set in US law. With the US Treasury Secretary and former Federal Reserve Chair Janet Yellen warning that unless the US borrows more, the money starts running out on June the 1st, just 9 days away, at which point the US will no longer be able to pay its bills. And the big one there is the payments it needs to make on its Treasury bonds, its debt repayments. Defaulting on those would quickly put the world's economy into a tailspin. No debt ceiling uplift, and the US could quickly hit the buffers and take out the global financial system in very short order. And the only way around this is to get the Republican and Democrat lawmakers to agree to lift the debt ceiling, just like they do every other year. Because only Congress is empowered under the US Constitution to borrow money for the state. But the Republicans are playing hardball and demanding spending cuts before they'll agree to anything, and they have the necessary votes. While the Democrats want to lift the ceiling without conditions so they can continue their borrow and spendthrift ways. And right now no one is shifting their position. So a default, either by accident or by design, is a distinct possibility. Something that would upend just about everything. Now I wonder if there's a plan in case that happens. A worldwide plan to keep the money flowing. But wouldn't that need to be some new form of money? Anyway, the House Speaker, Republican Kevin McCarthy, said that you can't just keep lifting the ceiling. Let's sit down and change our behaviour for the good of America, because what we're going to do is bankrupt this country and bankrupt these entitlements if we don't change their behaviour today, he said. Now, a week or so ago, Joe Biden's predecessor as president, Republican Donald Trump, said that the US had better get ready for a debt default, indicating he was urging his side to stick to their guns, a businessman's no-deal ploy, i.e., do it my way or no deal and I walk away. McCarthy has also had what he called a productive and professional meeting with Joe Biden, but that no deal had been made. But he said there was still time to get to that point. Now, if they don't agree something and the Treasury starts to run dry, then choices have to be made. And it appears that the debt payments will be the last thing to go, as plans have already been drawn up to withhold payments from people, companies and contractors first. And that is Janet Yellen's job to decide who gets what and when. There will be hard choices to make about what bills go unpaid, said Yellen. And according to Politico.com, so-called payment prioritization, which officials have studied and gamed out but never used in practice, could allow the US to avoid defaulting on its debt, the financial instruments that serve as the lifeblood of global markets, but it would require policymakers to potentially delay money sent to other individuals and businesses. Now, these plans are not new, because this isn't the first time US lawmakers have squabbled over the debt ceiling, so plans for payment prioritization already exist. So they'll be updated, and there'll be a lot of nervous government suppliers of goods and services out there. The US is as much in a cost of living crisis as the UK is, and it's not a good time to find your invoices are going unpaid. But that would just be the start. Just consider how the markets would react to that happening, especially if it dragged on a bit. Now the question is, would the Democrats try to call the Republican bluff? Do they think that in the end the GOP side will have to buckle and agree to a debt ceiling raise without condition, for fear of upsetting ordinary Americans whose lives would be affected badly by a Treasury crunch? Who would the US populace in general blame? The Democrats for just wanting to borrow and spend ever more, or the Republicans for stopping the borrow and spend, especially when they are threatening this when money is extremely tight? So most people think that they will come to a deal of some sort and the day will be saved with a debt ceiling increase in order to keep the government coffers with enough money in it to pay all the bills on time. But every increase in the US national debt brings with it increased debt payments. Not good when interest rates are going up. For an example, look at the UK national debt. Our debt repayments in April hit 9.8 billion quid. That's 3.1 billion more than April 2022, all down to rising interest rates. Oh, and we had to borrow that 9.8 billion quid to pay the interest on our borrowings. And when you sell bonds into the market, the interest rate you offer has to look attractive against the prevailing interest rates. And if they're index linked as well, then it could get really expensive. Now, the US Treasury is independent of government and gets on with the job with the money it has, and borrows as required up to the debt ceiling to supply the government with the dosh it needs. But when government overspends but finds that it hasn't got the clout in Congress to borrow more money, things get interesting. And it gets interesting for the whole world, not just for the US and its citizens. Now, someone did come up with the novel idea of saving the day by minting a $1 trillion coin and depositing it into the Treasury, so allowing the Treasury to borrow an extra trillion over the debt ceiling. Not sure about that one myself, but Yellen just called that a gimmick. But with the way things are looking today, it seems there is still a yawning gap between the Democrats and Republicans on this issue, with an almost accidental default looming. Now, on the other side of the coin, when the debt ceiling, or if the debt ceiling is raised, it's estimated that up to somewhere in the region of $1 trillion worth of Treasury bonds, better known as T-bills, will enter the markets over the next year, with estimates saying the first $700 billion worth could hit the markets in weeks. Well, the Treasury does need the money quite urgently, and one expects they will all be bought up. But what that does is removes $1 trillion in liquid cash from the economy. It tightens the economy. And the Bank of America said doing that would be the equivalent of the Federal Reserve raising interest rates by 0.25%. And with recent rate hikes, that would just add pressure to the US financial system. But isn't it strange that the US has a debt ceiling that everyone just expects Congress to lift every year or so without giving much thought to the repercussions? Not so much a debt ceiling as a one-way upwards debt elevator that stops at every floor for a while.